1950, psychologist J.P. Guilford walks up to a podium at the American Psychological Association. He's about to deliver what will become one of the most influential speeches of the century. His topic? Something called creativity. That word had barely existed for 100 years. It was just starting to creep into everyday conversation. But the audience ate it up. Within a decade, creativity would be everywhere. Boardrooms, classrooms, self-help books, corporate mission statements, kindergarten curricula. Nobody in that room knew something crucial. If you could somehow resurrect Plato and plop him down in the audience, he'd be horrified. Not because he was some ancient killjoy, but because the Greeks saw human making as fundamentally different from divine creation. We were copycats at best. Occasionally, if we got really lucky, the gods might work through us. But the idea that mortal minds should try to create something completely original, that wasn't ambition, that was hubris. And hubris, as any Greek could tell you, never ended well. The fact that creativity showed up so late to the party reveals how we've completely flipped our understanding of human potential, from humble craftsmen following divine patterns to individual creators claiming godlike powers. When you trace the word backward through time, the pattern breaks. Instead of gradual evolution, the word appears in sudden bursts, then vanishes for decades before exploding in the 20th century. Before that, sure, humans made new things, obviously, but Western culture never organized this whole capacity under the banner of individual creativity. This late arrival matters because it shows how recently we've made creativity into our secular religion. We build entire economies around creative industries. We promise parents will unlock their kids' creative potential. We've created this whole mythology where the creative individual sits at the center of human progress. But if creativity is such a basic human thing, why did it take us thousands of years to celebrate it this way? The answer isn't that ancient people were blind to something obvious. It's that they saw something we've forgotten. The Greeks had this word, techne. You can hear it in technique and technology, but techne wasn't about creating anything, it was about following rules. A potter practicing techne wasn't channeling his inner vision, he was nailing the established patterns, perfecting methods passed down through generations. The goal? Not originality, excellence within constraints. This wasn't some creative limitation, it was philosophy. Plato argued that artists were imitators of imitators, twice removed from truth. Reality itself was just a shadow of perfect forms. Human art? A shadow of that shadow. The idea that an artist might improve on nature or invent something completely new, that didn't seem ambitious. It seemed morally wrong. Why would you want to move further from truth instead of closer to it? Even poetry, which the Greeks actually respected, operated under divine compulsion. In Plato's Ion, this performer admits he can only do Homer when he's possessed by what he calls divine madness. The poet wasn't creating, he was receiving transmissions from the muses. Homer starts the Iliad with, "Sing, goddess, the rage of Achilles." Not "I will sing," but "Goddess, sing through me." That distinction? Crucial. The human was a vessel, not a source. Their vocabulary backs this up. The Greek word poiesis meant bringing forth, or making. It could describe revealing what already existed in potential, like a sculptor finding the statue hidden inside marble. But it was fundamentally about productive activity, not creation from nothing. Aristotle wrote that poiesis was about actualizing possibility. The artist was a midwife to forms that wanted to emerge, not some god breathing life into clay. The Romans nudged this a bit. They started talking about ingenium, natural talent. They allowed that visual artists might share something called imagination with poets. Revolutionary thinking, actually, and it met fierce resistance. Latin had plenty of words for making, building, shaping, forming, but the concept of absolute creation, that stayed mostly divine. Medieval Christianity doubled down on this distinction. Thomas Aquinas argued that human making was always creatio ex aliquo, creation from something. Only God created ex nihilo, from nothing. The artist was a craftsman following divine patterns, not a creator bringing forth novelty. This wasn't theological nitpicking, it was about the fundamental nature of human agency. To claim creative power was to claim a share in divinity itself. While medieval theologians were restricting the concept of creation, They were simultaneously developing ideas that would eventually blow it wide open. The notion of divine creation ex nihilo was itself revolutionary. Earlier Greek and Roman cosmologies described gods shaping pre-existing matter, but Christianity introduced this radical idea that something could emerge from absolute nothingness. This theological innovation would eventually migrate from heaven to earth. The Renaissance cracked the dam. Leon Battista Alberti wrote in 1435 that painting could show things that are not, a startling claim that art might exceed mere imitation. Leonardo went further, arguing that the painter was a kind of god, creating worlds that had never existed. But even Leonardo hedged his bets. He called the artist God's nephew, not claiming full creative equality. The real transformation started in the 18th century, and it happened in an unexpected place: aesthetics. Philosophers like Edward Young began arguing that originality, not imitation, was the highest artistic virtue. Young's 1759 essay, Conjectures on Original Composition, declared that an original may be said to be of a vegetable nature. It rises spontaneously from the vital root of genius. It grows, it is not made. Notice the metaphor: creation as organic growth, not mechanical assembly. This coincided with changing ideas about human nature itself. John Locke's empiricism suggested that minds weren't passive recipients of divine truth, but active processors of experience. David Hume explored how imagination could combine ideas in novel ways. Kant would eventually argue that the mind didn't just receive reality, it actively constructed it. But the word creativity itself? Still elusive. Early uses popped up in the mid-19th century, often in philosophical contexts influenced by German thought. Even then, it felt awkward, unfamiliar. The Oxford English Dictionary's earliest citation reads like someone testing out a foreign concept: the creativeness of the human mind. You can feel the hesitation. What finally broke the dam was industrialization and America's peculiar response to it. By the early 20th century, mass production had made traditional craftsmanship seem obsolete, but Americans, with characteristic optimism, reframed this crisis as opportunity. If machines could handle routine making, humans could focus on something higher, creating the genuinely new. The word creativity exploded after World War II, but not where you'd expect. It wasn't artists or bohemians who championed it, it was psychologists, business consultants, and Cold War strategists. Guilford's 1950 speech launched what he called the creativity movement, but Guilford wasn't interested in art. He was worried about scientific innovation and technological competition with the Soviet Union. The most surprising twist in creativity's history, our modern concept emerged not from romantic notions about artistic genius, but from hard-headed concerns about economic and military advantage. The same era that gave us creativity also gave us brainstorming, lateral thinking, and innovation management. Creativity became a technology for producing novelty on demand. The irony runs deeper. Just as creativity was becoming sacred in American culture, anthropologists were discovering that many non-Western societies had always recognized human inventiveness without needing a special word for it. Indigenous cultures often viewed making as participation in ongoing creation rather than individual expression. The Balinese, Margaret Mead observed, had no concept of art separate from life, no word for artist separate from person. They were creative without knowing it, or perhaps they were creative precisely because they didn't isolate the concept. This suggests something unsettling. Our modern obsession with creativity might actually inhibit the very thing it claims to celebrate. When we turn creativity into a commodity, something to be taught, measured, optimized, we risk losing the spontaneous play that makes genuine novelty possible. The ancient Greeks, who never spoke of creativity, produced works that still astonish us. Medieval craftsmen, working within rigid traditions, created Gothic cathedrals of breathtaking innovation. Maybe the secret isn't thinking about creativity, but forgetting about it entirely. The etymology tells this story. Create comes from Latin creare, to bring forth, or to produce. But the root goes deeper, Proto-Indo-European kur, meaning to grow. Creativity, in its deepest sense, isn't about forcing novelty into existence. It's about providing conditions for growth. The ancients understood this intuitively. They didn't create, they cultivated. They didn't innovate, they participated. So here we are, standing in the ruins of this linguistic archaeology. What have we gained and lost by inventing creativity? We've gained a powerful tool for organizing human potential around novelty and change. We've democratized the divine spark, insisting that everyone possesses creative capacity. But we've also created a new form of anxiety, the pressure to be original, to express our unique selves, to create something that has never existed before. The ancients lived without this burden. They found meaning not in originality, but in excellence, not in self-expression, but in service to something larger than themselves. Their artists were craftsmen, their poets were vessels, their makers were gardeners tending inherited traditions. Maybe there's wisdom in their humility, a recognition that the most profound human making happens not when we play God, but when we remember we are dust, shaped by forces we barely understand, participating in a creative process that began long before us and will continue long after we're gone.